The sun shines brightly over a luxurious wedding venue in Accra, Ghana. Elegant decorations, beautiful flowers, and well-dressed guests create a perfect setting. At the altar stands Kwame, a successful young entrepreneur, smiling with confidence. Beside him is his bride, Abena, a stunning woman from a wealthy family. Their love story seems like a fairy tale, and today is their happily ever after. The crowd erupts in cheers as waiters roll in a massive, beautifully decorated wedding cake. The couple laughs, holding hands, ready to celebrate their new journey together. But in the shadows, someone watches with a sinister grin. Ama, Kwame's ex-girlfriend, stands unnoticed among the guests. While everyone sees a joyful wedding, she sees an opportunity for revenge. Hidden within that grand cake is something deadly. The celebration is about to take a dark turn. Before Abena, before the grand wedding, before the success and celebration, there was Ama. Ama wasn't just another woman in Kwame's past. She was his first love, the one who once held his heart so tightly that it felt impossible to escape. In the beginning, their love had been passionate, full of excitement and deep emotions. She was stunning, confident, and knew exactly how to make Kwame feel special. But beneath her beauty and charm, there was something dark, something possessive, something dangerous. At first, Kwame ignored the warning signs. He thought her jealousy meant she loved him deeply. He believed her controlling nature was just her way of protecting their relationship. But as time passed, the love he once cherished turned into a suffocating prison. Ama was never satisfied. She needed all of his attention, all of his time, all of his love, completely. She questioned every move he made, accused him of looking at other women, and became furious when he spent time with friends or family. If he didn't answer her calls immediately, she would call again and again and again, until he had no choice but to respond. She was like a shadow that never left his side, watching, waiting, making sure he never forgot that he belonged to her. Kwame tried to fix things. He believed love could heal their problems, but love alone wasn't enough. The fights grew worse, the accusations more absurd. She would cry one moment and scream the next. If she didn't get her way, she would threaten to leave, only to beg him not to let her go when he agreed. It was an endless cycle of love, control, and chaos. The day Kwame finally decided to walk away was the first time he truly saw Ama for who she was. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't even scream. Instead, she stood still, staring at him with cold, empty eyes. "You think you can leave me?" she whispered. "You think you can be happy without me?" Kwame felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen Ama angry before, but this was different. This wasn't rage. This was something worse, something calculated. Ama didn't try to stop him that day. She let him go. She even smiled as he walked away. But that smile wasn't one of acceptance. It was a promise, a silent vow. If she couldn't have him, no one else would. Years passed. Kwame moved on. He built a successful business, met Abena, and fell in love again. He thought he had left Ama in the past, but Ama never moved on. She watched from a distance, unseen but always present. She followed his success, tracked his relationships, and waited. She waited for the perfect moment to remind him that he could never truly be free. And now, as he stood at the altar, thinking he had escaped her grasp, Ama was there, smiling in the shadows, waiting for her revenge. Kwame thought he had left Ama behind. He believed that breaking up with her was the end of their story. But for Ama, their love was never truly over. In her mind, they were still connected. He was still hers. And if she couldn't have him, she would make sure no one else did. For years, she watched him from the shadows, unseen, but always present. She followed his life like a hunter tracking its prey. She knew where he worked, where he lived, and who he spent time with. Every business success, every trip, every public event, she knew it all. Social media made it easy, but Ama went beyond that. She bribed people, hired spies, and sometimes she even followed him herself. She told herself it wasn't stalking, it was love. When she heard about his engagement to Abena, something inside her snapped. He was supposed to miss her. He was supposed to realize his mistake and come crawling back. But instead, he was preparing to marry another woman, to build a life with someone else. Ama refused to let that happen. At first, she considered direct revenge. She thought about ruining the wedding by exposing secrets, starting rumors, or even confronting him in front of everyone. But then, a better idea came to her, something more twisted, something more cruel. She wouldn't just ruin his wedding, she would make sure it was his last. Ama had always been intelligent. and she knew that a reckless plan would fail. If she wanted to get close to Kwame again, she needed trust. And so, she became someone new. She reappeared in Kwame's life, pretending to be a changed woman. She spread the word that she had moved on, that she had matured, that she was no longer the same person. She apologized to people she had wronged, reconnected with old friends, and even started a small catering business to make herself look respectable. Then, with perfect timing, she reached out to Abena's family, offering her catering services for the wedding. At first, Abena was hesitant. She had heard about Amma and Kwame's history, but Amma played her role perfectly. She showed up with a soft, apologetic smile, spoke about how she had changed, and even pretended to be happy for Kwame. She spoke of forgiveness, of growth, of wanting to move forward. She even shed a few crocodile tears, making sure to seem genuine. "Kwame was my past," she said sweetly. "I have no hatred for him. In fact, I wish him nothing but happiness. It would be an honor to cater his wedding." Abena, kind-hearted and trusting, believed her. Even Kwame, though hesitant, didn't see a reason to refuse. He had moved on, after all. Why hold on to old grudges? And so, just like that, Amma was inside. She had won their trust. She had secured her place in the wedding. Now, all she needed was the perfect moment to strike. Amma knew trust was the key to her plan. She couldn't just be at the wedding. She had to be inside it, woven into its very fabric. If she wanted to strike without suspicion, she needed everyone to believe she was a changed woman. She needed them to look at her and see kindness, not bitterness, forgiveness, not revenge. So she played the role perfectly. She became everything they wanted her to be. She was warm, helpful, and supportive. She arrived early to wedding meetings, always ready with a cheerful smile and an encouraging word. When Abena stressed over last-minute changes, Amma was there to reassure her. When Kwame hesitated about certain details, Amma gave him gentle advice, as if she truly cared. She even went out of her way to praise their love. "You two are perfect for each other," she would say, her voice filled with admiration. "I can't believe I ever stood in the way of something so beautiful." Abena, being kind-hearted, was touched. She started to believe Amma had really changed. Even Kwame, though wary at first, softened over time. He wanted to believe that people could move on, that even someone as intense as Amma could grow past their history. His friends, his family, everyone started seeing Amma as a woman who had learned her lesson. She made sure no one had a reason to doubt her. When an elderly guest at the wedding tasting spilled a drink, Amma rushed forward with napkins before anyone else could react. When a problem arose with the seating arrangement, she helped fix it without being asked. Every action was calculated, every move designed to reinforce the idea that she was no longer the woman they feared. She needed them to believe it. Because if they trusted her, they wouldn't watch her closely. They wouldn't question her when she moved around freely. They wouldn't think twice when she handled the cake. And the cake was everything. Amma spent weeks preparing for this moment. She researched poisons late into the night, searching for the perfect one. It couldn't be something obvious. No sharp tastes, no instant effects. It had to be slow, subtle, untraceable. It had to give her exactly what she wanted, a scene. She didn't want Kwame to simply die. That would be too simple. No, she wanted chaos. She wanted to see him collapse, gasping as people screamed for help. She wanted his bride to hold him in her arms, crying as the perfect wedding turned into a nightmare. She wanted everyone to remember that moment as the day everything fell apart. And so, she waited, she smiled, she laughed, she even cried during one of Abena's emotional speeches, wiping away tears like a woman touched by love. No one saw the truth hiding behind her eyes. Her act was flawless. As the wedding day approached, Amma knew she had done it. She had won their trust. No one suspected a thing. No one would stop her. And that meant, very soon, Kwame would pay the ultimate price. Amma had planned everything carefully, down to the smallest detail. She knew she had only one chance to get it right, and failure was not an option. The cake would be her weapon, the final piece of her revenge. She had spent weeks searching for the perfect poison. It couldn't be something obvious. No bitter taste, no strange smell. It had to be something slow and untraceable, something that would ruin Kwame before it killed him. She didn't want a quick death. That would be too easy, too merciful. She wanted suffering, humiliation, panic. She wanted him to collapse in front of everyone, his perfect wedding turning into a nightmare. And she found it, a rare toxin, almost impossible to detect, that caused delayed paralysis. The moment Kwame took a bite of the cake, nothing would happen. He would smile, laugh, maybe even kiss his bride. But as the minutes passed, the poison would start working. First, his hands would tremble, his fingers would lose strength, making it hard to hold anything. Then his legs would weaken. He'd stumble, struggling to stay on his feet. His vision would blur. His breath would grow shallow. Confusion, fear, desperation. And then, finally, his body would betray him completely. He would collapse, right there, in front of hundreds of guests, in front of his beautiful bride, in front of the cameras, capturing every moment. People would rush to him, shouting his name, trying to help, but it would be too late. The poison would already be inside him, spreading through his blood, shutting his body down, piece by piece. And the best part? No one would suspect murder. They would call it a medical emergency, a sudden mystery illness, maybe a heart problem, maybe stress, maybe an allergic reaction. They would never suspect that the woman who had baked the wedding cake was the one responsible. Amma smiled as she carefully injected the poison into the cake layers. She worked slowly, precisely, making sure the liquid blended seamlessly with the cream. No one would see it. No one would taste it. It would be perfect. She placed the last layer on top, smoothing the frosting over with steady hands. The cake looked just as it should, beautiful, flawless, innocent. No one would ever guess that beneath its sugary layers hid something deadly. She stepped back, admiring her work. The centerpiece of the wedding, the thing everyone would gather around, the thing people would cheer for, was now a weapon. And in just a few hours, Kwame would take his first bite, and his last. The wedding was like a dream come true. The grand ballroom sparkled under golden chandeliers, filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. The scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume filled the air as hundreds of well-dressed guests celebrated Kwame and Abena's love. It was perfect, exactly as it should be, and at the center of it all stood the magnificent wedding cake, tall and elegant, decorated with delicate sugar flowers and golden ribbons, the masterpiece that everyone had been waiting for. Amma stood among the guests, her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed on him. The moment was almost here. A loud voice boomed through the microphone, calling everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the cake cutting." A wave of applause erupted as Kwame and Abena stepped forward, smiling brightly. They held the silver cake knife together, posing for pictures, looking every bit the happy couple. Amma's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She had practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times. Kwame and Abena sliced through the cake, their fingers brushing against the soft frosting. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed, and guests clapped with excitement. It was a tradition, a moment of joy, but Amma knew what was coming next. Kwame picked up the first slice, laughing as he playfully fed a piece to his bride. Abena giggled, returning the gesture, smearing a bit of frosting on his lips. The guests laughed. It was sweet, romantic, innocent. And then, the moment Amma had been waiting for, Kwame lifted a second piece and popped it into his mouth. He chewed, swallowed, and reached for another. Amma held her breath. At first, nothing happened. He was still smiling, still talking, still the proud, happy groom. For a split second, Amma felt a tiny flicker of doubt. Had she miscalculated? Had the poison failed? But then, it began. Kwame's hand trembled as he reached for his glass. His fingers, once steady and strong, suddenly struggled to grip the stem. He blinked rapidly, his forehead creasing in confusion. Then, his body tensed, his breathing quickened. He placed a hand on his chest, his eyes darting around as if searching for something, someone. A flicker of panic crossed his face. The guests kept laughing, still unaware, but Amma saw it. The slight shake in his legs, the way his shoulders stiffened. The poison was working. Abena touched his arm. "Are you okay?" Kwame opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Then, his vision blurred. The room around him seemed to spin. The bright lights above felt too sharp, too blinding. His breath grew shallow, his chest tightening. Something was wrong. The first scream came when he stumbled. Someone gasped. A glass shattered. Guests turned their heads, concern replacing laughter. Then, he collapsed. Abena screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Kwame! Kwame!" Chaos erupted. People rushed forward, shouting his name, calling for help. His mother sobbed. His father barked orders. A doctor from the guest list pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside the groom, checking for a pulse. Amma watched, her face perfectly composed. Inside, she was smiling. She stepped closer, pretending to be concerned. She leaned in, just enough for him to hear her. In a soft whisper, she said, "It's over, Kwame." His blurred eyes flickered toward her, struggling to focus. There was something in them, not just pain, not just confusion, but realization, recognition. He knew, but it was too late. The wedding that had been full of joy and celebration was now a scene of panic and fear. Kwame lay on the floor, gasping for air, his once strong body now weak and unresponsive. His hands twitched, his eyes rolled back, and his breath came in short, ragged gasps. Abina clutched his face, her hands shaking, trying to keep him awake. Her wedding dress, once spotless, was now stained with cake crumbs and sweat as she leaned over him, sobbing. "Kwame, stay with me," she cried, her voice breaking. "Someone do something." Guests screamed and pushed back, creating a wide circle around the collapsing groom. Some stood frozen, their hands over their mouths, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Others rushed forward, pulling out their phones, frantically calling for help. A few guests tried to help, splashing water on Kwame's face, patting his back, whispering desperate words of encouragement. But his body only grew more rigid, his fingers curling unnaturally. The poison was working faster than expected. Then, through the chaos, a group of doctors in the crowd rushed forward. They pushed aside the frantic guests, dropping to their knees beside Kwame. One of them, a middle-aged man with glasses, placed 2 fingers on Kwame's neck, feeling for a pulse. His expression darkened. "He's going into shock," the doctor announced, his voice urgent. "We need an ambulance now." A woman in a blue dress, another guest, began administering CPR. Another doctor checked Kwame's pupils. "His body is shutting down. Something is in his system." Abena turned to the doctor, her face filled with terror. "What's happening to him?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Kwame's trembling hands. His lips pressed together. "It looks like poisoning." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Guests turned to each other, whispering, "Poison? At a wedding? How could this happen?" And then, through the noise, someone noticed something. Amma's smile. It was faint, but it was there. The slight curve of her lips, the glint in her eyes, a look of satisfaction. One of the waiters standing nearby froze, his face turning pale as he watched her. Something clicked in his mind. He had seen Amma near the cake earlier, right before it was brought out. He had seen her wiping something on her hands. A small vial she quickly stuffed into her apron. At the time, he had thought nothing of it, but now it made sense. With his heart pounding, the waiter stepped forward. "She tampered with the cake," he said loudly, his voice shaking. The entire room fell silent. Heads turned toward him. The doctors looked up. Abina's tear-filled eyes widened. Guests stopped whispering. Amma's heart skipped a beat. For a moment she didn't move. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then slowly, all eyes turned to her. The entire wedding hall fell into a stunned silence. All eyes were on Amma. The woman, who had once been nothing more than an ex-lover, was now something far worse. Amma didn't move at first. She stood there, her fingers still clutching the empty plate she had been pretending to eat from. Then, slowly, she smirked, a cold, heartless smirk. The waiter's accusations still lingered in the air, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she let out a low, chilling laugh that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. "You thought you could escape me, Kwame," she whispered, just loud enough for those closest to hear. Her voice dripped with madness. Kwame was barely conscious now, his breaths shallow, his body trembling in Abina's arms. The doctors worked frantically, shouting medical terms, trying to keep him stable. But Amma, she wasn't panicking. She wasn't even scared. She looked satisfied. "Never," she finished, her voice almost triumphant. A sudden roar of anger erupted from the guests. A group of men lunged forward, ready to attack her, but security guards pushed through the crowd, grabbing her arms before she could be harmed. Amma didn't fight back. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, allowing herself to be restrained as if she had already won. "Take her away!" someone shouted. The guards pulled her toward the exit, but before she was dragged out, she turned her head and locked eyes with Abena. Abena's face was streaked with tears. Her makeup was ruined, her hands still clutching Kwame's limp body. The love of her life was slipping away in her arms. And Amma smiled, a slow, wicked smile. "Enjoy your wedding night, dear," she murmured mockingly. Abina's body trembled with rage, but before she could say anything, Amma was yanked toward the exit. Sirens blared from outside. The ambulance had arrived. The doctors wasted no time. Kwame was lifted onto a stretcher, oxygen placed over his face. His eyes flickered open for just a second. unfocused and weak. He tried to speak, but no words came out. "You'll be okay, Kwame. Stay with me," Abena sobbed, running beside him as they rushed toward the ambulance. The guests, still in shock, whispered among themselves. Some wept. Others stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Amma, now surrounded by police officers, didn't struggle as they handcuffed her. She had already done what she came to do. As they pushed her toward the waiting police car, one of the officers turned to her. "You poisoned him. You ruined this wedding. Do you even feel remorse?" Amma turned to face him. Her eyes were empty, void of guilt or regret. And then, with one last twisted smile, she spoke. "If I can't have him, no one will." And with that, she was shoved into the police car. The doors slammed shut. Inside the ambulance, Abena clutched Kwame's hand tightly. His fate remained unknown. The poison was strong, untraceable. Would he survive? Would he ever wake up? No one knew. The perfect wedding had turned into a nightmare. And somewhere, behind those cold steel bars, Amma was still smiling. Some people never let go. They smile. They apologize. They act like they've moved on. But deep inside, they're waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Not all apologies are real. Some are traps. The past isn't always behind you. Sometimes it returns in the deadliest ways.